institution. Professor Anwar Ali is an economist by training. He did his training at Queen's University Belfast and the University of Leicester in the UK. He has spent a long career in Malaysia at the Kebangsaan University in Malaysia. He joined there soon after his training, although he took a period out from 1995 to 98 to be Director of Higher Education in the Malaysian Ministry of Education. One of the things I admire about Malaysia is the way that they move people backwards and forwards between the ministry and the universities, and I think this gives them an unusually close relationship and an understanding relationship between government and higher education. So anyway, Professor Ali ended up as the Vice Chancellor of Kebangsaan University until he moved in 2003 to become the Vice Chancellor and President of Open University Malaysia, a great institution as evidenced by the fact that they won an award yesterday evening. So he's going to launch us off this morning with a talk entitled Developing the Community, the Role of Universities and Open and Distance Learning. Professor Anwar Ali.
Observation on how we can develop the community and what is the role of universities and also particularly ODL in the years to come. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I think we all know that the development of community is very important in terms of the national agenda, particularly for developing countries. From where I come from, most of the Commonwealth countries, apart from the more developed colleagues of ours, we are still developing. And it is in that respect that community development is very important in the national agenda. Apart from that, my view is community development is a very broad subject and a very broad area which I will cover as much as possible, because community means the whole society, the whole population in any country that we discuss. So I think let us not just go into very small areas, because in developing countries like Malaysia, and I believe in countries like India and so on, we think that society's development should be the main basis of our development.
Some other countries as well. Education receives a big chunk allocated in the school. Defense, sometimes slightly over 25% perhaps, but most generally it will be about the education. Now, we all know that in the last 20 years, as I mentioned earlier, or even go beyond that, 25
people in the fringes, isolated and remote areas. And at the same time, as I said earlier, we have to emphasize the importance of lifelong learning. Now, we have heard so much about development ODL because it provides openness, accessibility, flexibility, and equity. And that's important. But these are people you provide for, because the people in the community want something that is tangible. They want to see diplomas, they want to see degrees. But of course, ODL institution that people while at work, they didn't have the chance before. They don't have the opportunity before. They are thrown
Here is you, yes.
Oh, here is me.
Yeah, yesterday.
Okay, okay. Thank you very much.
So you can also.
Capacity, and we're proud of that because they're one of our principal stakeholders. The private sector as well was notably Hewlett-Packard and Microsoft participated in the event to profile partnerships with UNESCO in higher education, but also to promote themselves. The major focus of the conference was on Africa, and the Rapporteur General for Africa was Nigeria's Professor Peter Okebukola. And in his conclusions at the end of the conference, he said, and I quote, "We found most strikingly an infectious dynamism among the over 1,200 participants of the conference." And then he concluded, "The matter of higher education is serious business," which was an important message. Let me now identify the key new dynamics that came out of the World Conference debates and
support required to have some good programs towards community learning for development was not forthcoming because community radios worked in isolation and there were not much of an institution. We find it difficult to prove the case in many instances, even though we have good pilot projects and others, to prove the case that it is community learning is working through the community media. So the finding good indicators with the possibility of verifying with available data was not forthcoming. But from the learning institution perspective, those who provide the learning, and the institution is responsible for working on education. Because in the community, in my view, that is, you cannot go with the subject teaching approach. You had to go through the problem solving approach. So it is not really a pedagogical method where you provide something like the ODL, the courses and things like that. If you want to get into the community learning, then you had to find another way as to how you are going to address community learning, which underpins a problem solving of the day-to-day problem.
Driven media. Are we talking also about media that's reaching and getting to the community? Are we talking about community using the latest gadgets? When I was in India, video was the thing, right? Now it's all the new media, the social media. Are we really having development and communities are using these new tools? Are we using
file is the table of contents. This is necessary. So again, in Notepad, either close it and open it, or delete the last lot that you copy and pasted and start again. So whatever you want to do. Okay? So we just saved as the last Notepad. Get rid of all of that because you've already saved it. Close it and open it, and copy and paste the next lot in under number 6, which is the table of contents. Finish it.
Certain hosted applications, such as Google Apps for like emailing, calendars, that type of thing, and Illuminate web conferencing for web conferencing and online classes. So what we did was some of the technologies we used were LambStack, Linux, Apache, MySQL, PHP, Face2M management system, all of which are open source technologies. The investment in that was more in terms of developing the skill in-house. So we didn't, even though we didn't pay for licenses for these applications, there was still a cost in terms of having to train your internal people to manage these technologies and to be able to build on them. We also use the Zen framework for application development, which meant that we didn't have to build our applications totally from the ground up. We had a framework to work with, so a lot of the general items were like database connections, that type of thing, were taken care of, so we could just concentrate on building functionality. We use Moodle for virtual learning environment. We've been using Moodle for quite a while before the open campus. So what we want to do is continue with that. And
my question specifically refers to the comment made about quality assurance criteria for open and distance learning institutions to be the same as for conventional institutions. I was wondering, when you made that statement and justified it by we need to compare ourselves with conventional institutions and therefore have to use the same quality criteria or apply the same quality criteria when it comes to quality assurance. Because our experience at the Polytechnic of Namibia was a bit different in the sense that we had to use different quality criteria as a dual mode institution when we had our institutional audit, specifically for the reasons of the fact that what we apply in ODL is quite different from what we apply to facilitate learning for conventional students. If we just look at the basics of, development of study material and provision of adequate learner support for students, which is not necessarily the same for conventional students, I somehow tend to disagree or fail to understand how we can use exactly the same quality criteria for ODL institutions as compared to conventional institutions, and I was wondering whether you could maybe just unpack that a little bit from the experiences that you have with institutions where they use the same quality criteria. Thank you.
Okay, now let me...
Well qualified. About 80% of those students are females, are women teachers. They are 80% and above is over the age of 40 years of old. So they are the older generation. And the majority by far teach in rural South Africa, where people still carry water to their homesteads on their heads, where there are no cars to park in front of houses, where children walk kilometers and kilometers to their schools, where there's no electricity, where there's 1,500 students in one school, all on a feeding program, with not one single library, with not one single computer available for those students. That is also the reality in our context. The question was, what is the profile of our students? Because the moment we started to enroll the students, we said, hey, technology is the answer. But we don't have an online program in our context. Although South Africa got the highest internet penetration rate in the southern, except for Mauritius, we have about 11% internet penetration rate in South Africa, and that's the most developed country in the SADC region. Now, if you hey, because I don't trust you behind me. I know some too well. But in any case, the fact of the matter is, when we did an analysis of our technology profile of our students, we became aware of the fact, and you all know it, that almost 100% of them do have mobile phones. That is cheap, it's scalable, it's affordable, it's manageable, but almost none of them in 2002 had internet access. Less than 3% had an email. Now, what we did an analysis of what happened with our student population from 2002, when we started our distance education initiative,